listeners, and welcome to this, the 55th episode of the Heresy Accountability Buddies podcast. I'm Jacob, and on this episode I'm joined by...
Duncan.
Jack.
Jamie.
And John.
And once again, joined by our fabulous guest, the one and only Jake Bussey. Jake, it's good to have you back for this show.
Happy to be here. In between recordings, I somehow fell into some COVID, so we're on the swing up. So hopefully we don't sound too COVID-ated today.
You sound sexy as always.
Stop dying,
Wonderful.
you coward.
Yeah.
You're good.
I'd like to remind everybody that Jake's name is no longer Jake. He lost rights to that name, I think it was 3 years ago now.
No, that was 2021, so it's only been 2 years now.
Oh, only 2 years now?
Yeah. Now, admittedly, I may have denied him the right to win that back, but that's more of my failing than his.
Okay.
We want to take a little bit of time to thank our sponsor, Elric's Hobbies, for sponsoring the show. They've been sponsoring us for a few episodes now, and we have the opportunity to offer our listeners a discount on their purchase via the use of the code HERESY, ABB, at checkout. Lets them know that their partnership with the show is working, and that you guys are finding out about them through us, and likewise gets you a couple bucks off, or a percentage, I should say. So look forward to seeing you there. Likewise, for some of you who were able to participate in the listening session for the live show that we had for the giveaway, we have that and other benefits available to our Patreons. We're hugely thankful for everybody who helped sponsor the show in that regard and keep us on the air. Thank you very much for that. We've got a fantastic show coming up here. We've got the pending releases or new releases to be able to talk about, as well as finally getting the chance to review those Space Wolf rules. Before we get to that point, though, we know we've got to kick it off with Hobby Progress. Who wants to get us started?
Yeah, so I've got roughly 3 days until I leave for Warzone Houston, so I am in super overdrive for nights. Got the last 5 nights that I didn't take to the Phoenix campaign event last month. I got all of those guys based. I got all their armor glued on. And included in 2 of those are 2 nights that I really went ham posing, fighting with shields from Tarot Model Maker and reposing with some big axes from Tarot Model Maker. Sadly now, because of the rules, they're probably some of the worst nights you can possibly take with no guns and just 2 close combat weapons. Look really cool, so I appreciate them. Got all those guys based. I got them all their armor glued on, and now I am working on some of the little bits and pieces that I left off. So all the knights have a tilt shield that's magnetized to their next to the head, and I've got all those clipped apart and ready to start painting tomorrow after I get done working. And then I've got to finish rearming up the Lancer. So on the way home from Phoenix, the Lancer fell over in my travel case and snapped his lance off. I have no clue where it went, so I'm going to peel the lance off of my resin Lancer that I bought and give it to him, and I'll probably just do a quick paint job on that to kind of hide it a little bit. But other than that, that's pretty much it for painting. I've been doing some last-minute experimenting with the Daiso shipping crates that everyone is going to get there. I can I'll give a quick gear review. The Gundam model airbrush or marker airbrush is absolutely terrible. I know that everyone is really shocked that a $12 pin holder that you spray air through is not good, but I can't explain how this thing functions. It sprays 3 inches down and to the left, and the spray pattern is just roughly. There's no consistency. Yeah, there's no consistency. There's nothing. It's just terrible. I ended up painting my hand more than I tried to paint models or the crate that I was working on. And since I was using the Gundam marker, I went ahead and painted up some of the grab handles for the armatures because I wanted those to match, but rather them not match to use this thing again. But I'm going to have to use it again for some of the so if you thought about buying a Gundam marker airbrush, I would recommend against it. I would just recommend finding some paint that matches close enough and use a real airbrush. That thing is just, I don't know how else to say it. But
not garbage.
For better and for worse, it was at least a cheap mistake to make.
True, it was not as expensive as the GW flamethrower airbrush that came out
Lord.
back in the day. It's the same build quality. I'll say that it's really cheap plastic. It pushed together. I did like the fact that the thread pitch was exactly the same as the Harder and Steinbeck Infinity, so that way I can use my QD connector on it. But ironically enough, the QD connector part is as expensive as the airbrush, so that probably tells you how quality it is. On top of the fact that if you've ever used paint pens, you know that you kind of have to vigorously bake them and do things to them. You have to do that every 4 seconds when you're using this airbrush, because you shake it, it gets the tip wet, and you spray it a little bit, and then you got to reload it, and so you got to vigorously shake it again. And my wife was laughing about as much as Jack is right now, and I was pulling a Jake right there. Yeah, I was going nuts. I was double fisting them. I had two metal brushes, going nuts. It was again $12 for $12 worth of work. That's everything I've done this week. I will pass it on. Can't breathe.
See here. Okay, I have worked on a couple of Cestus assault rams. They are to the point of detail and weathering. Worked on some las cannons for the Stormbird. Deckled a whole bunch of crap today. Rams, drop pods, dreadnoughts. Successfully used liquid mask for the first time. It's the Green Stuff World liquid mask. That actually worked out a heck of a lot better than I thought it would. So thrilled by that.
Yeah, it's super awesome as long as you don't leave it on there too long.
Yeah, I did it last night and then took it off today because I was like, I can't leave it on there forever. So I made sure I had time to get it knocked out, because you're exactly right. And then outside of that, working on a Daredeo and some jet bikes in the background. So yeah, Duncan, what about you?
Oh, let me see here. The assault squad I was working on last weekend. I finished them. They're sealed. I just have to get the motivation to put their decals on. I should hopefully get that done in the next day or two. I worked to clean out the basement. We have my daughter's workstation set up down here now for her to be able to actually work from home. So she's invaded my man cave. It's really terrible. I no longer sit in my basement alone. Now she works in her parents' basement from home. So good for her. Other than that, I've been working on the Blood Angels. I don't really like the Raldoron basic pose. I've never liked it, where it's got its sword kind of pointed down and cleaning off the blade from alien bloods and goo. Just kind of looks goofy to me. It doesn't look like something that's ready for combat. So I decided yesterday I was going to cut and repose him. So I did. I reposed it to where it's more like a come at me, bro pose, with a hand kind of going, come here, and a different sword that looks similar to the one from the actual model, but isn't. It came from Conversion World. Rest in peace, Conversion World. I got that kind of sticking out to the side, and I've got him base and zenithal. I don't have any paint other than that on him, because while I was getting ready to put more stuff, put the paint on him for the zenithal, I realized I didn't have enough stuff I needed to prime, and it would seem kind of wasteful for me not to have more stuff to prime. So I decided that it would be a good idea to build and zenithal and prime the Glorious Hawkboy. So I got Sanguinius built, other than his head not being in his on the body yet, because I'm going to have to do that separately. And I haven't decided which hand I'm going to stick on him, so I've got that done separately as well. And his wings. But other than those three bits, he's assembled. And like I said, he's primed and zenithal, and the wings are primed, and the head's primed. So that's pretty much what I've done. More productive than I have been for a while. Oh, I've also got 5 of the Angel's Tears ready for decaling as well. So that's about it. I think I will kick it over to Jamie. Jamie, what have you done, sir?
Jack and squat.
All right.
Most of what I've done is I've had a lot of household stuff that I'm having to clean up, and so I've been working on cleaning up my hobby area, and of all things, going through boxes that have been sitting in the corner of my garage for the better part of 8 years now, and finding multiple highly sought after books that everybody in multiple chats is like hammering me about that they want. So yeah, that's pretty much the extent of my my stuff this week, because I've had a lot of home and child duties this week because my wife is working a lot of nights. I will hand it off to the fabulous Jake.
Me?
Yeah.
Man, so like growing up, I used to go with my dad. He was a veterinarian, and he'd always take me out when he was working cattle, and so I'd watch him, like palpate 100 head of cattle, where you take your arm and you put it in a big sleeve, and then you shove it as deep as you can possibly get into the rectum of a cow.
Mm-hmm.
That's basically how deep I am in Skaven right now. So I'm staring at like 100 of them on my desk that I have in various stages of either all of them are assembled, all of them are base coated or primed, and man, we're just painting rat men. That's been hopefully if I can get these rat men done, then I'm on to the space wolves that we're going to talk about this evening, and get what I'm going to take to Adepticon kind of buttoned up and put together. But I got to get these rat men in a playable position before I jump to them. So that's just rats.
That's rats.
Just some rats.
With a side of rats and some more rats behind it.
Yeah, it's just all the rats. I've still got, like I said, I got about 100 of them sitting right here on my desk, and then I need to buy about 60 more, I think.
So at that point you'll have what, 300 points?
Yeah, yeah. So and that's with. So yeah, I'll have about 160 rats on the table, and that's 2,500 points, and that's taking a screaming bell, which is 400 points. So I could not take that and then take like another 30 to 40 rats if I wanted to. No big deal.
I remember playing fantasy way back in the day, and I'd have like 3 blocks of 20 dwarves and like 4 cannons, and that would be 3,000 points.
Yep. Yeah, that's rats are like I can take. I think it's like a 20 block of slaves is like 60 points, something like that. So you can take so many Skavens, like it's crazy.
Well, they're rat man. I look forward to their eventual accession into 40k. I guess that leaves it all up to you, Jacob. What'd you do?
It was a hard week here. I ended up, unfortunately, in the position of inventorying my existing heresy stuff for the purpose of basically getting out. Found out that even though I love these people dearly, the local community and I kind of aren't on the same page with a couple things. And so it's probably best for me to just continue my current method of disengaging rather than trying to continue either pushing forward or doubling down in that circumstance, as it were, unfortunately.
Well, I mean, obviously, your decision. We all here to be your friend no matter what, and hopefully we and you can find a way to that you can feel once again enticed to play again. We'll see.
I'd like to hope so, but ultimately, having had a little bit of a sit down with myself, at least in the wake of the discussion that the rest of the community ended up having, I think that reactions as they are at present are probably a sticking point that I don't immediately find a way through for myself. It's unfortunate, but I think that they unfortunately push us into gameplay territory that I would say early implementations of command points in 40k did, where rather than going to a per unit activation system, we're just going to continue to band-aid the game, as it were, and I'm just not here for it. I hope that it gets better, and if a FAQ upends that or changes that, or if an addition change shakes that up, I'm looking forward to being in line to sort of reassess things. But until such a time, unfortunately, not for me. But that's neither here nor there.
Yeah, and I'll do one
yeah.
more quick hobby thing. I went ahead and called into RFI and left a lengthy voicemail about the story of my Lancer Lord, Seneschal Aurelius, Baron of Colossae, Slayer of the Dragon of Alpha 9, awarded by Guilliman, noticed by Horus, Lord of Blurn and Clurn, Master of the Lance, Breaker of the Chains that Bind, Ringer of Bells, Smoter of Walls, Breacher of Lines, Joiner of Campaigns, Winner of Jousts, the first of his name.
And how many times did you say that during the 2 voicemails that you left? I think
And
it was like 8 that I counted.
First
yeah,
of his
Use that
name.
firmly.
First
Well,
of his
it's
name.
a-
That's just like the perfect little cherry right on the top. I love it.
yeah, it was. I was. You've played the orc side-scrolling shooter game. There's like a boss that's a knight and just comes in and it reads the entire thing and it starts like fading out because his name is so long as it's slowly just cracking up on the screen. And I also thought about the Game of Thrones. Every time someone would have to say Dany, they'd say her insanely
title.
long name. Yep,
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Well, it's earned, man. You have to say it. No.
of course.
It is what it is, though.
Made me chuckle when
I'd also like
I do
to
things.
give a shout out as well to Flying Phoenix Games in Wisconsin, who gave us the box set to give away that we actually gave, the Age of Darkness box set that we gave away in our a couple episodes back to Bryce or Byron. Byron?
Bryce.
Bryce. Yes, thank you, Bryce.
Bryce Piercy.
Yes, that was sent down to John last weekend. I believe John got that already.
Yep, and I handed it off actually today, and he was actually feeling a little guilty because he's expecting a little one in the next week or two, and he's like, I'm not going to get to this box set for a while. And I was like, man, it's your box. You do what you want. If you want to save it for a time when you've got less time, or if whatever comes up, it's your box to do with as you will.
Hobby go bag. He's going to be sitting in a room, not doing anything. She's doing all the work, so he might well get work done. Get a little kit, take the little table that they have in there for her to eat because he can't eat anything because he's in labor. Take that table and hobby on that table. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. Take some God hands and some super glue. You can probably get the whole kit of some.
And if they don't like super glue in the room because it's got fumes, he can use plastic glue. So it's all that's plastic.
Yeah, I mean more fumes and probably toxic in California, but whatever.
Yeah, I mean everything's toxic in California. Anyway, that's the only other shout out I had.
Yeah, past that, make sure that if you are at Warzone Houston, or if you, depending on when this episode has come out, if you were at Warzone Houston and you've got a cool story to share, don't be afraid to write into the show. We would love to read your fan mail on the air. From there, I think we've got our news items, the biggest of which was the revelation of a traitor champion that came to light in the last few days. Sort of a interesting counterpoint to the Loyalist champion. Very much some Sons of Horus marks on this sort of guy without being explicitly Sons of Horus. Got that kind of Mark II, Mark III sort of thing going on. There's some flair on him, kind of like the Comet Strike type stuff that strikes me as very Sigmar-y, which I'm not super wild about, but overall, I think he's a little more dynamic than what the Loyalists ended up getting with their "Behold my stuff" pose.
Yeah.
I like parts of it. I think it's almost a little. I've seen people describe it as AI or maybe third-party sculptor that got hired by GW on a Tuesday. I like a lot of it. I like the Sword of Omens look. I like the armored up look, but not for it because I think it makes him look a little too slow. But I do like the model.
I'm kind of like John. I like the model. I have a couple small foibles to it. I will probably get a couple of these to kit bash and fiddle with, like so many people will. One thing I am going to do, however, is no matter what, I'm going to replace that helmet with other helmets because I think, while yes, it's kind of a cool helmet, it doesn't scream the iconic heresy to me, if you know what I mean. Maybe something with a crest, and realistically, I'll probably replace the backpack too. But that's just me.
I mean, overall, I liked it, but the same issues I have with the new Mark III, I have the issues with this, the square knee pads and the the exhausts bother me a bit. I don't know how to say it.
No, I hear you. I hear you. We've said it
I,
before.
I thought it was a pretty good model, but then I've had other friends that I talk with on a very regular basis that looked at it and they absolutely hated it, and I have had other people say they absolutely love it. It's like there's not really an in between, I mean,
Yeah, no, I get it. Like I said, I'll get a couple of them because I want to kit bash and cut and fiddle and make my own. But yeah, he's cool. He's different. I do like his sword.
To John's point, I almost wonder how many of these we're going to see kit bashed into Siege Breakers or
he'd be a
Master of the
great Siege Breaker.
Forge, Tech Marine type dudes.
Yeah, he looks so thick with like 4 Cs. He just doesn't scream champion to me. The other guy kind of does because he's got that live.
Be a good ZM model.
Yeah,
this guy definitely
Breacher
screams,
Master or something.
This guy definitely screams up armored Mark III.
Yes,
in many ways.
Hey, the Mountain was a champion at one point in time, and what did he do to the small, fast, lithe guy? Literally shoved his eyeballs into the back of his head. So
crushed his head.
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean,
I think he's sick.
Wrong.
I like him.
Are you gonna get some?
I may get one. I don't know. I of course, and I'm in this weird spot with a lot of the character models where I feel like they're really, really cool, and I like most of them. But for my legions, I always want them more flavorful than they come.
Legion specific.
I think a lot of that's because of my specific legions that I play. Where I think if you play other legions, you can get away with a lot more plain or a lot. When you play salamanders and you play space wolves, it's like you want lizards on everything, you want fire on everything, you want pelts on everything, you want like there's just a different
It'd be like
look
Blood
to it.
Angels or Emperor's Children without the filigree.
Right, and like I said, I like the models, but at the same time, for a lot of my characters, I end up using either like Legion-specific models and then converting them, or doing a lot of work on mine. Not to say I wouldn't use him. I like him. I just don't know if I currently have a hole to fit him in right now.
Well, you could always start, a Trader Legion.
Instead of suggesting that, I genuinely was going to say kit bash this guy with an extra model from your... who is it? We're about to just talk about him. The Death Wolves, and use him as a Speaker of the Dead.
Yeah, that could be done. I mean, as we'll get to later, you can't have too many of those guys.
See, I prefer my idea of you going Trader, since, I'm sitting here painting loyalists.
I don't know, man. Like I mean, I've got my demons, but they're not really even traders. They're just like
cats and dogs friends. I mean,
we just trick these goobers to like do what we wanted and look at them go. Like there's a whole different level to what they're doing. I don't know.
We also did get I believe the Acheron and Castigator are releasing this weekend. Is that accurate? Additionally,
they're coming out for pre-order.
Yeah. We got a super surprise drop, hot on the heels of the Demon Engines. We got Trader Knights. We won't be going into those this show. We're going to try to reserve that for next show. But regardless to say, outside of the fact that they're Trader...
You got to get me to stew a while. There's some stuff in that book.
He's got some opinions. And honestly, I can't wait for that next show. But regardless, I think, unless there's something I've missed, I think we're on track to migrate over to talking about the Space Wolf rules. Does that sound about right?
We've got one more thing. We finally got a concrete release date for RPG game coming out by Owlcat.
Yeah, Rogue Trader. You were talking about that at last episode, maybe? Getting some swag passed out for that, like a pin and something?
Yeah, so they dropped some swag at PAX, and they're finally dropped a release date. Cut out later. December 7th, 2023 is going to be our release date. So that will, they've dropped a whole bunch of trailers for this. They've seemed to imply that you can have Dark Eldar join your crew. You can have a Space Wolf join your crew to keep it topical. Join the 4 Chaos Gods if you want to go Rogue Trader and go crazy. no end. Apparently, you can have relations with every female NPC that's in the game, according to other Owlcat games. So
There
it's
we
going to
go.
be definitely an interesting
There's the
game to
former
play.
BioWare devs showing back up again. I knew that everybody who worked
Yep.
on Mass Effect hadn't left the industry.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to that game. I pre-ordered the Fancy Pants edition. It comes with a big statue of a Navigator. The first times we're actually going to see what they look like and how they can devastate people in combat. So it'll be cool.
Very exciting. Here's hoping that turns out to continue to advance the state of Warhammer IP-related games. I know we've had some ups and downs over the years, but hopefully after Bolt Gun was a winner and Space Marine 2 has been getting a lot of high praise, here's hoping that Rogue Trader can keep that trend moving in the right direction.
Jacob, you say that like Fire Warrior doesn't exist.
I do say that like doesn't
Ooh.
exist.
Ooh.
The game where you take on the job of
I
one
might.
Fire Warrior who can kill an entire army.
I might
Oh,
go and
Space
bleep that
Marines.
out here.
I'm going to say this because I might be kind of unpopular here, but I think my favorite part of that game was the fact that the enemies all actually fired off of Imperial Guard ballistic skill. Because if they fired like an entire magazine at you, you might get hit once. So that game was horrible.
Means we're accurate. You were inaccurate.
Either way, that game was terrible, and I'm glad I only played
I
it
think-
like 2 or 3 times.
I think the best part of that game was some of the things you could overhear the discussions. Like one of them was talking about why Space Marines are so good. It's because they take kids that are just out of adolescence where they think they're invincible and then make them invincible.
I mean, it's pretty much the truth.
Yeah.
Speaking of making kids invincible, Space Wolves.
Yeah. Speaking of children and horrible things, Space Wolves.
Space Wolves.
So, at the urging of at least one of our listeners, we're going to try to change up our formatting for how we end up talking about these rules. We're going to talk about the Legion-specific rules, including their reaction. That'll include some war gear, and in the Space Wolf case, I think 3 or 4 HQ choices by the time you get into the expanded content. We'll run through their units, finish with their characters, and then kind of sign things off with their rights of war. Once we've talked about all the different puzzle pieces, the rights of war will help give us some context on how we can put those together. To start things off, the Space Wolves trait is Bestial Savagery, a unit made up entirely of infantry and Space Wolves that chooses to run in the movement phase may still make a shooting attack in the shooting phase and declare a charge in the assault phase of the same turn. But any shooting attacks are snapshots. The unit units that cannot run, such as Cataphracti models, instead gain +1 weapon skill on the turn in which they charge, even if the charge ends up disordered. So that already in and of itself, and the fact that you have a boon that works regardless of if the other guy braces for the charge or not, and can break parity in combat, really, really strong. Models with the vehicle unit type and this special rule get +1 strength on the ram to a maximum of 10. I don't know that that's worth a whole lot, because I don't know that I see ramming ever anymore. I saw it very sparingly last edition, and I've seen it even less this one. Further, there's a couple different war gear options, as well as the option to take, instead of a chaplain, librarian, or primus medicae, you get access to the Speaker of the Dead, Caster of Runes, and a additional weird choice, which is Pack Thane. And we've got, of course, unique warlord traits and such.
I think the big thing on that bestial savagery, so that's the thing that I think everybody that played Space Wolves in the first go round of Heresy got really frustrated, because that type of rule existed, but it was just for your troop choices.
Yeah, it was Slayers only, unless you took Russ, and then I think you could take it as a vet skill for vets if you took Russ.
And what that meant it meant you could not put an independent character in with just your basic boys. And that really limited what you were able to do on the tabletop. So and it was one of those things. I feel like for Forge World, I feel like they do a really good job, at least in my experience, they have of taking the Legion and then writing the rules and making the rules match what you read in the lore, read in the Black Library novels, etc. Like I always felt like I was playing a Space Wolves army, and that's one of the things that always frustrated me though, because it was like, hey, why all of a sudden they start out as troops and then they move up? Why do they not remember how to like run and then punch people in the face? Like that doesn't make any sense. Why can't I put my Wolf Lord in with my Slayers? And so this now is a stock standard across the board rule for all of Space Wolves, and it makes them super awesome and extremely fast.
It sure does. I would be remiss if I didn't chip in here on behalf of at least one, if not two, of the local Space Wolf players in the area with regard to their frustration that even though, like, even outside looking in, this is a really, really powerful rule, they feel like it kind of dumbs Space Wolves down to just being Heresy-era orcs. It's like, congratulations, you have the wall, you have Old Fleet, run across the table and just slap the other guy in the face. And I'm like, you realize that's actually a way to win a game, right?
So that's basically my playstyle, and how I like to do things. So I guess when I look at it, I'm like, wait a minute, I get to do exactly what I want to do with the army that does it really, really well. So, and if we're talking about WAs, just wait till we get to our Rights of War, and then we'll really crank some WA on, because that's how I run my guys.
You've still got the WA as a warlord trait, but we'll get there in just a moment. First, we've got their unique reaction. Their unique reaction can be used once per battle in the opposing movement phase, I believe. Yeah. So when an enemy ends within 12 inches of one of your units, you can say, no prey escapes the wolf, and may attempt to charge that unit. And now that's only one unit gets to make that charge, but you do get to charge, and specifically you move a number of inches equal to the highest initiative characteristic, and then charge. So if you've got a character or somebody in there, to say nothing of Russ himself, jacking that initiative stat up, suddenly you're going to go I5 or faster, so you'll get 5 inches closer, and if the other guy was already at exactly 12, you're now looking for a 7-inch charge on 2d6. That's really not bad, especially if you've got units like bikes or jet bikes. Now, admittedly, those units can't run, but that's just going to give you +1 weapon skill when you charge out of phase with them. A bike command squad with this special rule can charge on your opponent's turn and go to weapon skill 6 when they do so.
Let me tell you, this one is sick in Zone Mortalis, because you can be like just hanging out, somebody moves up, and then, I mean, kind of close quarters anyway. They do have to be within line of sight. And I think the way it's written, they have to start the turn within 12 inches and then they move, and then you get to do what you want to do. So they have to be within 12 inches anyway, but in ZM, that's not really a problem.
They do have to start within 12 and then wherever they end. So let's see here. With one or more models within 12 moves, they have to finish their move and then you go after them.
Yep.
So this is almost more, based on that, this is almost more akin to like piling in and having a pile-in assault, as we saw in older editions. And then I think 8th edition 40k brought that back as well.
It's nice. When it works, it's really, really cool. It's sort of situational just because you have to be within 12, but at the same time, like I said, with Space Wolves moving as fast as they do, there's a lot of times the enemy starts their turn within 12 inches of you. And like I said, in ZM, it's really, really cool.
Yeah, and from there, Jake, do you want to run us through their Warlord traits?
Sure. Yeah, so the Warlord traits, you've got the Howl of Mordecai, which basically is once per game, Space Wolf models, they gain +1 strength when they charge, and they gain an additional reaction in the opponent's next movement phase, which is really awesome when you pair it with some other things that you get to fire off once a game when you do your Rights of War. Basically, and the way I look at it, it's kind of like you kind of like Michael Scott when he declares bankruptcy. You just start at the beginning of your turn, you say, I declare Howl of Mordecai, and then all of a sudden all your guys just get to punch a little bit harder. which is great. That's one of my favorite. That's pretty much the one I run with. You've also got Hunger of the Void, which your warlord can kind of gain lost wounds back from inflicting unsaved wounds in combat. So you lose a couple wounds. All the next go around, you do some wounds. At the end of the turn, you get those back. And then if you're all the way full, you gain +1 attack and strength for a game turn. And you also get an extra reaction in your opponent's assault phase. The only thing that makes this one a little bit more situational is you have to start the turn with wounds, because normally your warlord's going to be swinging first anyway, right? So he's not going to get wounds back. I don't know. It's one of those, and it doesn't happen until the end of the phase. So you can still get killed out, but if you don't die, you start gaining those things back. And I don't know. Like it could be good, but it's just a little bit more situational, because you get them from doing wounds, but you're normally swinging first. So it's normally you do the wounds and then they do wounds to you, and you're not being able to get those back because you're not doing the wounds, if that makes sense. I know that's a kind of convoluted in my head, but I think it made sense. And then finally you have Crownbreaker, which the warlord's unit gains preferred enemy and gains 5+ feel no pain when in combat with an independent character. They gain preferred enemy independent character and then gain feel no pain 5+ when in combat with an independent character. It's kind of fluffy, but it's once again kind of situational, and there's other ways to get those exact things, like taking a Speaker of the Dead that gives them to you all the time, as opposed to having to wait around on whether or not you're in combat with an independent character. But I don't hate it. It's just very situational. And then you get an additional reaction in the opponent's movement phase. I think Howl of Mordecai is kind of the clear cut. That's the one I like. I think Hunger of the Void could be really, really good. I just haven't had a lot of experience with it, and I think it's kind of situational. I think Crownbreaker is probably the most situational of the three.
Yeah, Hunger definitely relies on you face tanking some small arms fire with your warlord on the way in. But then it ends up feeling almost, unless you've got a second HQ choice in there with him to sort of eat that challenge, or maybe he's with a command squad where he's got other dudes with chosen warriors to eat that challenge for him. It kind of turns into a win more, because you want to lose 1 wound, cause 2 unsaved wounds, and then get the kick to strength 6 on the next turn with like your Paragon Blade. But ultimately, if you wanted strength 6 with the Paragon Blade, I don't disagree that you could certainly just use the Howl of Mordecai and get there.
Yep.
Crownbreaker, I think you make a really prescient point that if you are out of HQ slots and you're scrambling for more Speaker of the Deads, Crownbreaker really does come into its own, but you've got to be in a really specific situation for that to be wanted like that. Subject of Speaker of the Dead, they will come along after we get through some of their armory options. So we do have a couple, we've got a pretty expansive armory here for the Space Wolves. There's the Fenrisian Axe, where anybody who took a chainsword, any infantry who take a chainsword can take a Fenrisian Axe for 2 points a model. You give up Shred, but you get +1 strength and Reaping Blow 1. I don't know if that's immediately worth 2 points a model, but if you end up feeling like you're going against a lot of Traitor Militia or Traitor Solar Ox, I don't know if that's a thing, or... well, it used to be demons, but that's not really a thing. I guess Traitor Mechanicum, if you've got a lot of tech thralls to chop through. Maybe this sees some use, but otherwise I feel like you're overpaying relative to what you get.
This edition made chainswords so good. And it's almost frustrating, because it's like your brain instantly goes, ooh, +1 strength, like chain axe, right? Like, why would I not take that? That makes, like, that's excellent. But then you start thinking about it and you're like, well, yeah, but otherwise I get shred and I'm getting to re-roll all those misses. So there's definitely a place for both. And what I'm building for Adepticon has both. It's just not as instantly as good of it's not as instant pick as it used to be to go, oh, I'd rather be strength 5 than strength 4, because now strength 4 has re-roll your wounds.
That's why I choose to go with chain axes, because they have +1 strength and shred.
Arguably, the strength 4 with reroll ends up shaking out better against targets like dreadnoughts. by the time you figure every model in the squad still has a crack grenade for anti-tank, if you manage to come across one, you'd rather use those crack grenades than the Fenrisian axe anyway. So
The axes look cool though.
they look super great, and we do have at least one unit that ends up coming with them native, so we'll have that to be able to fall back on. Then you've got the Frost Blades. The Frost Blades are approximately unchanged from last edition. They are +1 strength, usually over their normal counterpart, and they typically gain Reaping Blow, though sometimes at the cost of another rule. So if you already had a power weapon, you can pay 5 points to frost it. And any Space Wolves independent character can take a Great Frost Blade for 10 points more than what a power weapon would cost them. There's a couple spots where you can take Great Frost Blades that aren't independent characters, and it's very akin to like a Blade of Perdition used to be in Blood Angels, and that weapon's pretty capable. So we've got the Frost Sword, Strength +1, AP3, Specialist Weapon, Reaping Blow 1. The Frost Sword, to me, is kind of the biggest loser in the room. You not only lose rending, but now you're down to being a specialist weapon, and all you have to show for it is +1 strength. You've then got the Frost Axe, which is a normal axe where you've taken on specialist weapon to get Reaping Blow 1. This is a little more usable, but outside of Varagir, it puts your sergeants in an awkward spot where previously you may have wanted to take a Frost Axe on them just to have that Strength 6 axe, and now you don't get the Strength kick, and you're saddled sort of with this. Now, admittedly, if you were taking normal, let's say, either Tartaros or Cataphractii Terminators, depending on your preference and your playstyle, Tartaros Terminators can run and then attack normally, and I could see a world where you could really bully enemy troop choices just by taking Frost Swords or Axes on all those guys, because you'll pay just 5 points a model for the privilege. That's 175 for a squad of 5 Tartaros with that. Is it amazing? No, but you're going to make a mess of attacks as soon as you get those guys into close combat with enemy tactical marines, enemy assault marines, and even though obviously there's some drawbacks or some risks there, what happens if you hit a dreadnought, or what happens if you hit enemy terminators? If you've got other resources that can cope with those threats, may not be the worst use of your resources to consider.
Yeah, Jacob, I think that's a good point. Just thinking about, I think with the Frost Blades, the best way I think to use them is somewhat in non-traditional ways. Like I don't normally upgrade my sergeants or folks like that with any of the frost weapons just because of the specialist weapon rule. I'd rather have more attacks. Like I run power axes on the leaders of my squads, mostly so I don't lose the attack from the specialist weapon rule. But if you can either find a unit that allows you to double up, or kind of like what you're saying, like a Terminator has, you run a gun, you don't have the 2 weapons anyway. And it kind of gives you that ability to where that's not hurting you as much. And then you get the bigger bases, which gives you a better chance with Reaping Blow when people start piling in. Where 40, you're going to get a lot more against a 40 millimeter than you get with the 32s. So I think there are some places for these. It just may not be as, I'm taking a sergeant in this squad. Obviously, I'm going to take the power axe and then I'm going to upgrade it to the frost weapon, because you might not get as much out of it as you would like. But I think there are places for these.
Yep. Then we've got the Frost Claw. The Frost Claw to me is a bigger loser than the Frost Sword. Strength user, AP3, you give up rending, you give up the paired weapons rule, and you get specialist weapon Reaping Blow. So versus a Frost Sword, I suppose it's a better weapon because we just talked about Shred is typically going to fare better than +1 strength because you're not altering an instant death threshold. But it's still frustrating, for sure. But the last one, there's a reason why they limit it to independent characters and a few other odds and ends. The Great Frostblade is Strength +2, AP2, Melee, Reaping Blow 1, two-handed. So you have an AP2 weapon that does not swing at Initiative 1. You're Strength 6 standing, and even though you are two-handed, so you don't claim dual-armed, the ability to wound on twos and deny armor saves is really incredible.
Yeah, they don't suck. I like them.
We've also got the Aether Rune Armor. For 25 points, you can upgrade your Artificer Armor to gain +1 wound and Adamantine Will 4+.
It's the business.
+1 wound is really challenging to put a price on. Adamantine Will, probably not worth the most this edition. But if you've got characters who you either think you can successfully, like we talked about earlier, if you've got chosen warriors around them, where you can force feed other models into bad instant death scenarios, the ability to get +1 wound is certainly worth something. 25 points to me is a little spicy, but for your warlord might be more of a consideration, especially if you liked the Feed the Void that we talked about in the warlord traits earlier. Gives you a little more forgiveness that if something goes wrong there, you're not suddenly like, well, I took 3 bolter wounds on my warlord and now I'm down to 1 wound left.
If you put your Jarl in places where they ought not be, like I do a lot, it's good to have. It's good to have that extra wound.
Speaking of the Jarl, you can upgrade a Praetor, Cataphractii Praetor, or Tartarus Praetor to a Jarl for 10 points, gaining that model counterattack 2. It can also be given the Skirmish subtype for free. Hey hooray hurrah. Skirmish will come into its own when we end up talking about the troop choices. Do we know, I didn't look this up to cross-check this as part of my show notes here. Is counterattack 1 to many? If it's 1 to many, 10 points is a very small price to pay for that privilege. If it's just the model itself who gets it, 10 points for counterattack 2 probably isn't too bad. I could see some lists deciding it was too much to pay. But if you're in an environment where a lot of your trader opponents like to get in close combat, counterattack 2 means that you now gain more attacks for being charged than what they gain for charging you. And that can really upend some challenges. Or we keep talking about chosen warriors. If you've got the guy with the Paragon Blade who just starts tearing into the rest of the squad, that ends up paying off big time.
I think that's a big Space Wolf thing of it's, a lot of armies are really benefit from charging. They really want to get the charge. The Space Wolves kind of go, they don't care. They just want to fight you. They don't care whether you hit them first or they hit you first. They just want to hit somebody. And I think that plays really well into kind of how they work, which is, listen, I'll fight these guys. I'll beat them up. Then you jump on me. Oh, nope, I'm still really good. And when you've got a Jarl with counterattack 2, plus, you start stacking some extra, like 2 close combat weapons on him, and then you start popping Howl of Mordecai, and you start, going, oh, and all that fun stuff. You really can turn him into a blender and do some damage.
It says if a unit contains at least one model with the special rule and that unit is charged, every model with counterattack special rule gains a number of additional attacks equal to the number in brackets.
So it is not 1 to many. It's
Correct.
Just going to be the Jarl.
Yeah, he'll get his
Correct.
2. Everybody else is going to get 1.
Yeah.
Also, if you're already locked in combat, or if you make the hold the line reaction, you don't get a benefit of it.
Right.
Makes sense. I definitely would say that the other thing that makes Jarl worth it is if you're really going to slam 6 troop choices and hope to just make the most out of that troop choice, you're probably going to take a Jarl and maybe a Pack Thane. Pack Thane is similar to Jarl, a 10-point upgrade, and it grants you counterattack 1, and you may take the Skirmish subtype. It's unfortunate to see the same, you pay 10 points for this special rule, but hardly hardly the worst thing in the world. Again, if you're really trying to utilize those core choices. Then we've got some of the weird ones. We'll go with Speaker of the Dead first. Speaker of the Dead is possibly the most expensive console upgrade in the game, or at least on its face it is. He is a 65-point upgrade. He can be for a Centurion, Tartaros Centurion, or Cataphractii Centurion, but he's not allowed to take dual Lightning Claws or a Boarding Shield. He increases his leadership to 10, and all Space Wolves he joins gain Stubborn and Hatred Everything. He also gains an Arthesium, so 5-up Feel No Pain, and a Master-Crafted Power Maul for no additional points cost. So he can choose to give up that Master-Crafted Maul. He just won't get to bestow Master-Crafted on it like a Chaplain could with his Thunderhammer.
Speaker of the Dead may be the greatest. Like, in my opinion, he's the one that if I could take 10 of them, I would. Because it's like every bad thing, like everything that I want to throw at the enemy that makes them go, oh my God, why is this thing coming at me? I hate it. I want to put a Speaker of the Dead in. Just because he does so much. He is a chaplain, he is an apothecary, and he fills both of those roles in one little fella, and he's just such a boost to every unit he goes in. I'd run 4 of them if I could. I'd run 5 of them if I could. I just like they're such damage multipliers, and then they also add so much to your resiliency, especially if you're running a bunch of boots on the ground. I'm a big fan of the Speaker of the Dead.
Well, yeah, especially if you had any illusions of running Terminators this edition, for the fact that you can double dip on Chaplain and Primus Medicae for a Terminator unit is
well, you can't take the Medicae.
Strong. Well, but that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, right.
This guy
exactly.
comes with an Arthesium.
Exactly. Yeah, he's 2 for the price of 1, and like I said, just getting the Stubborn and getting the Hatred to everything. Like, you just hit like a ton of bricks, and then everybody's getting Feel No Pain. There's just I love him. I love everything about him.
We've also got the Caster of Runes. Caster of Runes is not cheap at a 45-point upgrade. Your Centurion, Tartaros, or Cataphractii can be upgraded to him, and he becomes a Psyker. He can either choose the unique discipline Winds of Fenris, or he can pick Divination, Telekinesis, or Biomancy. So one of the boogeymen of the edition is Telepathy. That's off limits here. And that's relatively significant. Biomancy's still very capable in the right list and in the right hands, especially if you can start doubling up Biomancy with Howl of Morkai. Suddenly your Thunderhammers go to Strength 10 on your rank and file dudes. That's pretty excellent. Furthermore, the Caster of Runes gets Adamantine Will 4-up, and he may choose to take a Psychic Hood at 15 points. He can, for his 45 points he comes in the door, also upgrade his power weapon, bolt pistol, or combi bolter to a force weapon at no additional points cost. So what's particularly nutty there is that you can therefore dual arm this model. Even if he's a Terminator. Terminator librarians typically don't get that privilege, to my knowledge, unless that's changed this edition. And so the fact that you could theoretically take a Force Axe on this guy and still take a Power Sword for just everyday crowd control, really, really something special there. As for their special psychic school, Winds of Fenris, the shooting attack is a Strength 5 AP 4 Assault 1 Flamer template with Deflagrate and Force. So you can either use it as a Strength 5 AP 4, just fine, or you can Force and push that up to Strength 10. There's some moderate salt here now that we've done both White Scars and Space Wolves, that they have better psychic weapons than what Thousand Suns get, but who's counting? And finally, you've got their other psychic power, which is technically a weapon. Instead of making a shooting attack, the controlling player of a Psyker with this psychic power, Stormrot, may select a single friendly unit with at least one model within 6 inches, and composed entirely of infantry, cavalry, or dreadnought models. The chosen unit gains Shrouded 5. And if you choose to take a psychic test, that Shrouded 5 gets pushed to a Shrouded 3. Holy cow. I understand that the Cognos Signum will override this rule, but if the other guy didn't take a heavy support squad, tanks don't get the ability to break Shrouded. Javelins don't get the ability to break Shrouded. The only way you overcome Shrouded is close combat or that Cognos Signum. The fact that these guys can just get that 5-up Shrouded reaction for an entire turn for free, no counterplay involved, or they can push that to that 3-up is super, super nutty. Obviously, you can't stack that with other damage mitigation rolls, but by the time you've got a 3-up Shroud, I shudder to think what you would need in terms of Feel No Pain.
Jacob, it's hard to shoot when you can't see.
Right? So there's more than a moderate amount of salt there, but that's not the Space Wolves' fault that they got something that I think is really genuinely capable here. You've both got resilience against shooting, which your army very much wants, and you've got the ability to push some strength 10 shooting of your own downrange. That Wrath of the Death Wolf will absolutely delete Thalax from the board, because you push it to strength 10, it's AP 4, so it already doubles them out. And now when you're talking every 2-up to wound, I'm just removing 3 wounds a model. Really, really strong stuff.
So what of these do you take, Jake?
So I haven't ran a Caster Runes yet in this edition. Used to in the initial edition, I took Biomancy just because I kind of liked running around and then him kind of buffing himself up into kind of a mini beat stick and then having him just beat the hell out of things. Honestly, though, going forward, I really think that when I do run one, it's going to probably be this Winds of Fenris Psychic Discipline, just because, and we'll get to it a little bit later, but I think that my Space Wolves personally have moved a lot more from being a vehicle focused, load them up, drive them across the board, get them out, okay, basically I'm going from the old battle wagon list to now more of just like the Green Tide list, where I'm putting a bunch of boots on the ground and we're running that way, and being able to pop that Storm Rot to keep your really critical units from just getting blasted off the board, and then showing up and then dropping a strength 10 flamer on somebody. There's maybe it's the Salamander. I mean, I really like the sound of a strength 10 flamer. So I think going forward when I do. And this is where I was talking about the Speaker of the Dead. I tend to fill my choices with Speakers of the Dead, and I don't have room for a Caster of Runes. But when you do take the Caster, this Winds of Fenris is going to be hard not to take.
Then we've got our Legion-specific units. We will lead that with the Varigir. For my money, I think compared to the position they were in last edition, Varigir have gotten a big glow up. I do still think this unit can be extremely expensive, but as a pseudo or actual command squad replacement, I think these guys really shine. They start at 250 points for 5 models. They come with Frost Axe, Sword, or Claw, Combi Bolter, Cataphractii Armor. Cataphractii Armor makes them heavy, so they can't run, but that just means that when they do charge, they'll get that Weapon Skill 6 kick. 2 attacks base on rank and file guys, 3 attacks on the Sergeant, lead 9 on the Sergeant, and then we've got a big bucket of special rules. They have Fear 1. They are relentless. They have Counterattack 1. They are stubborn. They have Hammer of Wrath 2. And they have a unique rule called Lord's Bane. So Hammer of Wrath 2 means that even if the other guy tries to tar pit you with, we talked about Tech Thralls earlier, somebody took the largest possible unit of Tech Thralls. Between your Reaping Blow and Hammer of Wrath, you actually get a chance to sort of bowling ball some of those out of the way. You've got Counterattack 1, so that even when you get charged, you still get the bonus attacks as if you charged, and that's assuming you don't want to brace for a reason of like shutting down the enemy's special charge bonus. And of course, Fear 1 is just really, really good to have. Even if you don't make it to combat, Dropping that leadership skill can sometimes make a big difference. Likewise, you've got full-on stubborn and not just inexorable. That's pretty potent. If they number no more than 5 models, they can take a Proteus. If they are larger than that, they can take a Spartan instead. Yay, dedicated transports. Additional Varigir are 45 points a model, and they may replace, any model may replace their Frost weapon for a Power Fist at 10 points, or Chain Fist or Thunder Hammer at 15 points. Oddly, I think the Chain Fist is probably the worst upgrade for these guys. I would maybe bury one somewhere in the unit just so that you have one in case of a rainy day and you need to bite the other guy's Spartan. But I also wouldn't be surprised if once bullets start flying, the first model you're going to pull off the table is the guy with the Chain Fist, because Chain Fists are no longer specialist weapons, and therefore you no longer claim dual armed. Actually, now this says replace Frostblades, but we'll get to that. Thunderhammer at 15 points, that's a little more expensive than what I wish they were, but I don't think that's bad given how strong they are. Varigir 1 model may take a Vexilla, and then further, any model may replace the Combi Bolter for a greater or lesser combi weapon at 10 or 5 points respectively. Any model may take a Heavy Flamer, very funny. Any model may take a Reaper autocannon. Somewhere, John is crying over the fact that these guys still kept that, but Fulmentaris didn't. And finally, we've got the most interesting option to me, which is a second Frost weapon. Second Frost weapon at 5 points a model. Now, admittedly, by the time you do that and Thunderhammer's on everybody, you're dropping on 10 models another 200 points. But you do truly have the ultimate be-all, blend-all in close combat. By the time you may or may not attach your Praetor, but you're almost certainly attaching a Speaker of the Dead. And you've now got a unit with Hatred. You've got a unit with Counterattack. It's got Feel No Pain. They've got 2 wounds a model, 2 up armor, 4 up invulnerable save, the ability to go to weapon skill 6 if they manage to get the charge on you. Counterattack for when you decide, I don't want you to be weapon skill 6 and charge them. Just nutty. Finally, the Thane, the Sergeant, may take a Great Frostblade at 10 points. I could see either way on that. I know some people will certainly pass on that, but I don't think there's anything wrong with putting somebody in there who exists solely for the purpose of, if you don't have an invulnerable save, I'm happy to take that challenge and cut you down for the privilege. Their unique special rule, Lord's Bane. Models with this special rule may issue and accept challenges as if they were characters, not unlike Chosen Warriors. And in addition, when fighting in a challenge, if the enemy challenger is removed as a casualty, you add an additional +1 to the number of wounds caused for the purposes of resolving who wins combat. So by the time you've gutted their HQ I shouldn't say HQ choice, you've got a character, you've got fear, you can really start tamping that leadership value down, assuming the other guy doesn't have stubborn, and your odds of successfully sweeping him, and then putting your opponent in a bad position where now you can use that Legion-specific reaction to hop back into another combat where they can't shoot you. That gets really out of hand. I'll also take this time to note, much like Biomancy, where you can give up your shooting and you can cast that power and get potentially +1 toughness, which, as of the time of this recording, you can still do as part of a reaction. You could always put a Speaker of the Dead, a Caster of Runes in this unit, and when targeted, declare return fire as their reaction. Any number of models could return fire if you left any guns on anybody, but if you didn't, you've still got the Caster of Runes who's able to cast that 3-up Shroud. Just to get you that little bit extra defense that a normal 5-up Shroud wouldn't get you. And what's more, that will last the entire turn.
Yeah, I think Varigir are pretty sick. I'm a big fan of Terminators. I like them. I think they really do well in Zone Mortalis, which normally I don't like Cataphracti as much in Zone Mortalis because they're so slow. But with my Varigear, what I like to do is run them right up the middle as kind of a control unit because they are meat grinders. They can do so much damage, and the way I like to kit them out is with two different specialist weapons. I've actually got to rebuild Varigear because my old ones were Claw and Chain Fist for that reason. So that way you could either swing at initiative or at AP3, or you could swing down low, at initiative 1 at AP2, whichever one you needed to do. So it made the unit really versatile. They could go in anything. They could tear anything up. I'm probably going to go probably swords and hammers on my next unit. I tend to keep the unit small because they are so expensive. Keep them around 5 models. I used to pair them with my Wolf Lord and run them up in a vehicle. On foot, they're a little more difficult to use. Mine are probably going to see a lot more use in Zone Mortalis than they're going to see in a regular, full-size game, just because of the style of play that I'm moving to. They're a little bit harder to move around on an open board, but you can do it. I've done it, and I've played them that way before. They're just a little bit slower than everything else, but they are really good for kind of putting in the middle of your army as sort of a, hey, this is coming, and if nothing else, they absorb a whole lot of shots.
Every time I build a unit for these, they end up being roughly like 10,000 points because I want all the things because they're so cool. And yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just thinking, like, mine normally runs about 350 points for 5 guys. I think is kind of how I normally keep it. And like I said, I like to keep them at 5 because once you start getting up to 10, you could do a whole lot of damage with 10, but you are spending a whole lot of points too.
You're at 700 points. At that point, you're like, well, crap, I got to put them in a Spartan, so we're at 1,000.
That's right. And I played that game before. I mean, I got salamanders. I know what it's like to run, literally 1,600 points in a Spartan sitting in the middle of the table, and then you just fill the rest of the points out with whatever's outside of it.
Yeah, because
that's no problem.
You're going to put a Speaker of the Dead with them, and at that point, you're going to put your prayer with them, and then suddenly you have like 2 tax squads and a dreadnought.
Yeah, take the Spartan because it's 12 characters in a unit.
Yeah. I think the best thing to do with them is for sure keep them melee based. I like running opposite specialist weapons that gives you more versatility. That way you can go into anything. Like my Terminator units, I tend to run like, I hate to use the term Death Star, but I like having big just beat stick units, and I like to take those beat stick units and run them at other people and beat them with my stick. And so I want that unit to be able to do anything. I want it, no matter what it goes into, it can do damage. And so if you've got those guys with some Thunderhammers, which are arguably one of the best things in the game right now, and then you got them with something that's AP3 or AP2 that swings at initiative, in the case of like the Great Frostblade, I think that's a pretty good setup for them. And them getting 2 wounds, because everybody got 2 wounds, helped them out so much, because the first go round when they only had 1 wound, it sucked. It sucked so hard losing those models when everybody else had 2 wounds and you had 1. So especially when it's from like bolter fire. So they're a lot more resilient now.
Now I'm gonna make the pitch. Go claw and hammer. Because I genuinely think the claw is better than the sword. I think the sword might look better. But that takes us to, outside of the points, what I would consider the biggest drawback to this unit, and that would be the models. A lot of the Space Wolf range, as it released, kind of got lambasted as banana pelts, and yes, we definitely finished designing these in time for Book 7 to come out, with all the bolters with the sights upside down and like just completely missing the handles, and yeah.
No, that was totally on purpose. We put bayonet lugs on the top, and we put our front post sight on the bottom, because that's just how we do it on Fenris. I don't know about you guys.
All I get is, you see, Ivan, when his hold gun like this, will his shoot more accurate for fear of shooting on fingers.
I tell you, I do respect the hustle. Like, I respect the fact that Games Workshop, after all this time, number one, is still selling the Slayer kit with those bolters, with no, like, everyone knows, hey, when we put it in CAD or whatever we did, we accidentally just flipped the thing and then nobody noticed and we printed a mess of them. But like, they've never owned, like, they just accept the fact that, yeah, this is the Fenris pattern bolter and this is what they look like and this is what they ignore the fact that other Space Wolf models are, have their bolt pistols set up correctly and their bolters set up correctly. Just these bolters are the ones that don't look right. I don't know. I respect just the pure blatant, like, maybe it's a British thing. I don't know, where it's just like, we're just going to choose to ignore your reality and just, I don't know. I love it though. I appreciate it.
Yeah, we've had a few times where it's like British people don't understand. Come through for. I mean, we didn't get a safety proper rest position until what, like position? That one rogue trader guy that happens to have his finger outside the trigger guard. It took him
Maybe
30 years to sculpt that.
Yeah, just a bit.
I'll give him this though. The Varigear I was very hard on when they first came out, and I've actually got a set now thanks to Secret Santa, and they're not near as bad in person. I think a lot of it was the paint job that they had, and sometimes Games Workshop does that when they paint their models. Certain things will really be highlighted. But I've seen them in the wild. I've seen the Varigear models on the tables, and it's not near as banana furry as they seem to look online. Actually, I've thought about not even shaving it down and resculpting it. I may just paint them the way they are, because the models themselves, outside of the banana fur concerns, are not bad looking models, and the Frost Axe is actually really, really cool.
I'm also going to take this brief moment to highlight this is not the first time that Space Wolf models have been like front and center for an dare I say artistic controversy, and I'm not even talking about Papa Grimnar's sled. I'm instead talking about what was that, 5th edition, when we got the guy who's riding the Thunderwolf. Before we got the Thunderwolf cavalry box, there was the HQ choice who had the 2 claws riding the... I distinctly remember one of the commission painters in my group at the time was like, I will no longer take commissions on that model, because it was still in white metal. It was like $50, and he was like, I spent 2 weeks and half a tube of green stuff just trying to get the model to fit together and fill the gaps and resculpt the fur. And he's like, I've done it once, and much like many members of this group are like, I've paid my Fire Raptor tax, and I will never do so again.
Build a Crudox, the old metal one, and then you'll understand new levels of pain.
Dude, the old metal Chaos Dreadnought.
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
that thing was bad, especially if you were putting on the
With
flail.
the flail finger. Yes.
Yeah, those. Oh my god, that was probably, other than the Fire Raptor, that was probably the single worst thing I've ever assembled in my life.
No,
Thunder.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, my Thunder Squirrel. He's around here somewhere. Here he is. Hang on. Oh yeah, he lost a couple of arms in the drawer, but mine's fine cast. When they first came out with fine cast, honestly, like, and everybody that's talking, plug ears if you don't want to hear this, but like, I'm the guy that if Thunderwolves showed up in Heresy, I would be like, oh hell yeah, Thunderwolves, let's fucking get on our bikes and ride.
I'm right there with you.
I love Thunderwolves, and honestly, I've always liked this model, even though a lot of people don't. I ran him literally every single game of 5th edition that I played Space Wolves, but he was a bear to put together. For a lot of those reasons. Luckily, mine was at least fine cast. A lot of people crapped on fine cast, but at least with the fine cast, it was easier to fill those gaps and to kind of do some of the work. It wasn't so heavy; it glued together better. You had a lot of the same problems, but the solutions were simpler.
Look, if you get Thunderwolves, I'm going over there and I'm going to pick up a Juggernaut, and I better get those for War Leader.
Hey, I'm down with the Juggernauts too. I love Thunderwolves. I don't like. Okay, you take. I mean, literally, my Wolf Lord on his Thunderwolf mount with his wolf claws and his wolf pelts and his wolf tail talisman. Like, I listen, I'm down for it.
You forgot the Wolf banner.
Yeah. Yeah, I can be Wolfie McWolferson, son of Wolf, first of his name all day long.
Moving forward, we do have the Deathsworn pack. These guys were kind of the rock star for Space Wolves last edition. And they've, relative to Varigear's glow up, these guys have unfortunately kind of gotten tamped down a little for my money. Move 7, weapons, ballistics 4, strength tough 4, 2 wounds, eye 4, 2 attacks, lead 8, 2 up save. They have no sergeant. They are heavy. So they'll go to weapon skill 5 on the charge now. Bolt pistol, power axe, frag and crack grenades, stasis bombs, and artificer armor. They are Space Wolves. They have the Cult of Morkai special rule, Dreams of the Death Wolf special rule, Counterattack 1 and Stubborn. Counterattack 1 and Stubborn, nice to see. They can take a Rhino, I don't know why you would, but you can, or a Proteus. Hooray, hurrah. 5 extra models at 30 points a model, and any model may choose to take a Power Fist instead of Power Axe, 15 points. For every 5 models, one may take a Great Frost Blade or a Thunder Hammer, and then the entire unit may take one of the following, either Melt-A-Bombs or Rad Grenades at 20 points for the whole unit. I know that a lot of people are going to gravitate to the Thunder Hammer because it's a Thunder Hammer. As long as you don't think you're going to have to mix it up with Dreadnought or enemy Terminators, I think that even if you're going to mix it up with enemy Terminators, I would tell you to take the Rad Grenades and the Great Frostblade. I think they're significantly better, especially if you're already taking a Howl of Morkai Praetor as your Warlord choice, because you can pick the turn that these guys get to charge, hopefully with the rest of your army, to pop +1 strength for the whole army, and that's an opportunity there. I don't disagree, Jake, to your point that these guys run into the same problem Varigir do, but differently in that they're heavy. So you can't run them across the table more quickly, and you've really got to play that dedicated transport game to hope to get them there.
On the plus side, their models are so freaking sick. Like, I would give
they're
all of the
fantastic.
banana fur on all of Banana Island in order to have gotten these models that we got, because like when you read in book 7, when you're reading the description for these guys, you're like, okay, these are going to be sick. And then when the models came out, I was like, oh, okay, these are beyond anything I could have tried to put together. I like the models. I think they used to. I think they also got all of their attacks at the end. Where now the Dreams of the Death Wolf, you still do get, if you go down in combat, at the very end of combat, you get to make an attack. So you're still getting something for your points.
Each model makes a single attack instead of making all their attacks. Where it used to be like they're 2 attack space, 3 for dual armed, 4 on the charge. Now it's just 1 attack per guy who dies early.
Yeah, I like the models. I think they still have a place. I do agree. Being slow does hurt them a little bit, but at least they are move 7. And they do have that 2+ save, and then you throw a Speaker of the Dead in there because you can.
Subject
and you get
throwing a Speaker of the Dead in there. They can only be joined by Speaker of the Dead or Caster of Runes. So no Jarls, no Pack Thanes, no Praetors, only one of those 2 guys. And they may be taken as retinue for those, instead of as an elite's choice. So that's pretty cool to get them out of the elites, and get them an opportunity to be taken. It's unfortunate. I shouldn't say it's unfortunate, because if the whole squad gets shot out from under your Speaker of the Dead, he can just go make friends with somebody else. Because they don't lose the independent character special rule, they just can't leave the unit. Well, if the unit left because they died, whoops.
No, and I think a big thing they've got too. I mean, when you really think about it, you stick a Speaker of the Dead with them, and all of a sudden you've got they've got Artificer armor, so you got a 2+ save, you got a 5+ feel no pain, and then on top of that you got 2 wounds. That's a pretty survivable unit that can do a whole lot of damage when they get into contact with something. And they're also stubborn, so they're not really going to go anywhere. And then they have all the bombs, they come with power axes, and then throw some extra weapons in there, throw the Rad Grenades in there.
Those bombs, like the stasis bombs, when the enemy charges. Oh no, hold on. Any unit which charges a unit, so they're old like plasma grenades. So they disorder enemies who charge you. In addition, the controlling player of the unit that includes stasis bombs may choose to activate them when charging, before rolling for charge distance. The stasis bombs remain active until the start of the controlling player's next turn, so that's pretty cool that if these guys hit the line, you can then kind of get a second charge out of them with that Space Wolf unique reaction. and they may be activated again on future charges. While active, all models with stasis bombs add Fleshbane and Get Hot to their attacks. Do we know, does Fleshbane affect Dreadnoughts, or does the Dreadnought unit type force you to only wound on 6s?
It does something. There's a caveat in Dreadnoughts, because I remember looking it up not too awful long ago.
While
I believe you have to re-roll successful
Yeah, it's something
wounds.
like that.
Man, that's still not a whole lot to be bothered with. Wounded on 2 up, even if you have to reroll your successes, you're just gonna maul a Dreadnought for hitting it. While we look that up, I think it's important to highlight that because these guys are heavy, and because that means they'll get weapon skip 5 on the charge, I feel like they're a little more, depending on what you're trying to charge, dependent on that privilege. And so I think that there's something to be said for having other units to draw fire off these guys. Whether you're going to talk a Tartaros command squad, Cataphracti command squad, or Varigir, you want something that's scarier than these that will have an invulnerable save or the ability to get that awesome 3-up shroud to either capitalize when your opponent goes, man, I don't know that I have enough volume of fire to cope with the invulnerable saves on that unit, so I'm really just going to try to hammer down these Death Wolves, or the other end being, man, I'm pretty sure I can survive the Death Wolves for a turn or two, but if those Varigir hit me once, let alone twice, that's going to be the end of the game for me. So just
Yeah, Jacob, it's rerolls.
Okay. Man, yeah. So, stasis bombs absolutely will let you maul a Dreadnought. Sure, you'll get hot on those attacks, but by the time you've got a Speaker of the Dead in there to be able to re-roll those, that's a lot. But yeah, just make sure you're being mindful of threat assessment by the time you get these guys on the table.
And maybe them being slow. I'm just thinking about it like in my specific instance. Where if you got a lot of bodies running across the board, and you've got Gray Slayers, Gray Stalkers, all these power armor dudes just running as fast as they can. You got these guys kind of in the middle, moving a little bit slower. It could really force some decision making on your opponent of hey, what do I shoot at? Do I shoot at the things that are here right in my face, or do I shoot at kind of what's sort of working its way up the board? It may not be the worst. I'm not saying that them being slow is a good thing, but it may help drive some consideration.
No doubt. We've also then got our core choice swaps. So previously, where we had the Gray Slayers, I think it was, I think it was Gray Slayers. Now we've got the Gray Stalkers and I think the Gray Hunters. Whatever the case, we have 2 different troop choices now. 145 points for the 10 models at the start of it. They have skirmish and line, and otherwise an approximately normal Space Marine stat line, but I think they're -1 leadership. Actually, no, regular tactical Marines moved down to a 7 base 8 with the Sergeant, didn't they? Because they used to be 8 base 9 with the Sergeant. Yeah, everybody got tamped down. So you've got the same stats there. You are paying 45 extra points for the skirmish unit type and some other odds and ends. So the Stalkers begin life with bolt pistol, chainsword, and frag crack grenades. You do keep Heart of the Legion, but you give up Fury of the Legion for counterattack 1 and Relentless. If you've ever wanted to fire your gun up in the air and go, these guys will let you do that.
Big fan.
You can buy up to 10 more Stalkers at 12 points a model. You can buy Bolters or Combat Shields at 1 point a model. So keep in mind, you already have the Chainsword. You can buy the Bolter for 1 point a model. So you get your foot in the door at 155 points. If you stack that up to a tactical squad who is paying 5 points a model on Chainswords, that squad's 150 points. So for 5 points, you are trading Fury of the Legion for Relentless and Counterattack 1. And I don't think, to me, that that's a bad trade on its face. Any model in the unit may exchange the Chainsword for a power weapon at 5 points a model. I wouldn't go crazy with these, because you are still just weapon skill 4 and 1 attack base, but grabbing either one axe or one sword here or there just to get something in there can help you swing combats. Likewise, for every 5 models in the unit, one may take greater or lesser combi, again at 10 or 5 points. You can take a flamer at 5 points. You can take a Volkite Charger or Caliber at 5 points. So this, to me, we talked about this a little bit as part of the, Devastator Dreadnought that came in the Dark Mech PDF, where it's like, why are you making me pay more points for a worse gun? So both of the Volkite guns are 5 points here, one of which is supposed to be balanced by the fact that it's heavy. This squad has Relentless. Please just buy the heavy gun. Anyway, moving on. You can take a rotor cannon at 5 points. I don't know why you would, but if you've ever wanted to act like a Blood Angel and go brrr, you can now. You can also take a plasma gun at 10 points or a meltagun at 15 points. Plasma guns are not the worst choice here, but generally, given that I feel like the Legion already wants to kind of play in the other guy's face, I think the meltagun or the Volkite is probably going to be my pickup. The Volkite is so cheap, it seems a shame not to grab it. And even though the Melta is expensive, remember, you're still ballistic skill 4. So as long as you are not running and trying to shoot your gun at the same time, that Meltagun's still going to work the same as it will for any other Astartes. Further, for every 5 models in the unit, one may take a Heavy Chainsword at 2 points, Power Fist at 20, or Lightning Claw at 10. I think all of those are just a little too expensive for my blood. I understand that a Lightning Claw gets shred, but not having the ability to take a pair of Lightning Claws means that generally you're going to be better served by a Power Sword. You get the same rending 6, you get to claim your dual-armed, hey hooray hurrah. For every 5 in the unit, one may exchange a bolt pistol for a hand flamer at 5 points or a plasma pistol at 10. Please don't do this. One guy can take a Nuncio Vox, 10 points. One guy can take a Vexilla, 10 points. So they cannot take the, what is it? You've got the Nuncio Vox, the Vexilla, what's the other piece of war gear that I'm thinking about that's escaping me right now? Is it just those two?
The, augury scanners.
Augury scanner, yeah, the one that lets you, ignore night fight. Or, I'm sorry, the one that lets you draw line of sight beyond 24 inches and not reduce your ballistic skill. Ultimately,
Intercept.
And gives the free interceptor, of course. Honestly, not the end of the world that you can't take one of those, because you should be playing pretty aggressively, and you don't have any guns, to my knowledge, outside of that Volkite that are going to shoot beyond 24 inches anyway. There you go. The Huskarl may exchange his chainsword for a 20-point Power Fist, please no. 10-point Lightning Claw, please no. Frost Blade at 15 points, please no. Thunderhammer at 25 points. Who do you think you are, a veteran sergeant? Again, you're not weapon skill 5, you're only 2 attacks. That's probably way too expensive. The Huskarl may swap his bolt pistol for a hand flamer at 5, plasma pistol at 10. I wouldn't. May exchange chainsword and bolt pistol for 2 lightning claws. It's very funny that they have developed the ability to fire bolters while wielding dual lightning claws, but who am I to say otherwise? That said, 2 lightning claws at 15 points, not the worst pickup you could make. You'll be 4 attacks standing, meaning 5 attacks on the first round in any combat. Sure, you'll only hit on 5s against weapon skill 5 opponents, but even just the other guy, like, charging you with vets, as long as you can manage to not get roped into a challenge, and even if you do, you got a real good chance of killing the other guy in the challenge, and either coming out a winner and living to do it on the next turn, or you trade places with him, and that's not too bad. Finally, the Huskarl may trade power for Artificer Armor, 10 points, probably worthwhile. The Huskarl may take Meltabombs, 10 points, probably not worth much. Before we get too deep in analysis for that, we've got the Grey Slayers. We have troops choices here that got more pages of rules than some whole legions did for their special units. Grey Slayer pack, 145 points, same stats as the Stalkers. The difference is they come with Bolt Pistol, Fenrisian Axe, and Combat Shield. No bolters, you do still get Relentless, you do still get Counterattack 1, you do still get Heart of the Legion. You are still a skirmish unit type. So you've given up your Chainsword, but now you've got the Fenrisian Axe and the Combat Shield for the same points. Up to 10 extra models, 12 points each. Any model may swap the Combat Shield for a bolter for free. So, remember, we said that the Chainsword was probably better than the Fenrisian Axe. You can get these to kind of be very similar in that regard. Strangely, though, these models with bolters may choose to take bayonets or chain bayonets. Very strange to me. Anyway, any model may take a power weapon. For every 5, one may take a heavy chainsword, power fist, or lightning claw. For every 5, one may take a hand flamer or plasma pistol. One may take a Nuncio Vox. One may take a Vexilla. The Huskarl may swap his axe for a power fist, lightning claw, frostblade, or thunderhammer. He may swap his pistol for a hand flamer or plasma pistol. The Huskarl may swap his axe and pistol for 2 claws, may swap power for Artificer, may take Melt-A-Bombs. It goes a long way to say, the Slayer pack just feels, unless you really, really want... Man, even if you really wanted...
Don't say that too loud during that promo.
Combat shields, you can get combat shields on the other unit, and no unit gets to double dip both bolters and combat shields. These guys can't take the gun options that the earlier squad can take. And if you believe, as I do, that the Chainsword is better than the Fenrisian Axe, I'm kind of struggling to find out why they made Grey Slayers a unit outside of the bits that they put in the Space Wolf upgrade kits are just regular axes. And so they're like, well, we have to find something to call those, and we have to make a unit around them.
Yeah, I've done the math too, because all of my homeboys are swords and boards. I did that back in when they first came out, and so when they released the Stalkers and the Slayers, so my guys instantly fit into Stalkers because they all had chain swords. And if you kit them out exactly the same, Stalkers and Slayers. So if I give Stalkers combat shields and I give Slayers just kind of how they come, the Slayers come out a little bit cheaper. I think it was the way my math was doing right. It was like 20 points or 30 points cheaper to kind of get the same thing going. So if you want to run shields, it's a little cheaper to do it with the Slayers.
Oh, yeah, that's fair, because you're paying 1 point a model for shields, I think, on the Stalkers. So that ends up being a 10-point upcharge. And if you don't take the extra guns, then, yeah.
Right. And one thing I did find, so I think there's a little bit of place for both of these. I actually, in what I plan to run and what I'm building right now, is kind of to run 20 of each, 2 squads of each, or 1 squad of each, giving me 20 and 20. So that way, I used to run a lot of combi meltas. I'd run a couple combi meltas in each squad, just so I was like, oh, well, if I run into a Rhino, or if I run into a Dreadnought, or if I run into something, I need to pop it before I charge it. What I found was, most of the time, like I said, I'm that dumb Space Wolf player. Like, I just want to run and charge. I don't want to run and shoot. I don't care about being relentless. I want to run as fast as I can so I can take this sharp, pointy thing in my hand and insert it into the body of somebody else. And so, for my, like, I think there's plenty. The cool part about it is, as many rules as there are, there's so many different ways to run these squads, especially the Stalkers. They have a lot of versatility. For my money, I want to run them with as few shooting options as I can and as much punchy options as I can, because otherwise I'm just wasting it. I would find myself not wanting to run and get that extra movement so I could fire 1 combi melta or 2 combi meltas off, which normally didn't hit anyway. So I ended up taking those out. The way I normally run mine, like I said, I run shields on all mine because I think they look really cool. And then I run between about 2 power weapons per 10. 2 to 3 power weapons per 10, so 4 to 6 for a full squad. And then the cool part is, don't forget the way the rules are written, any model may exchange its chainsword for a power weapon, which means also the Huskarl. So your Huskarl for 5 points can take just like a power axe, which is how I normally kit them out. as opposed to taking any of the other Huskarl specific options, because power axes are just good. Like, they're a good, cheap option to just put another one in the squad. So I'm running, let's see, 20-man squad with 7 power axes, I think, just to make sure that when they get into something, they can tear something up. And that might be a little overkill, but that's okay too. But I do like to have about 2 to 3 per 10.
Yeah, I think that's a good take. I think that's certainly important. Before we get to the named characters, we do have the X-Bat unit and the legacies to go over. Their X-Bat unit is another troop choice, the Yorland Hunters. 125 points for models with hand flamers, chainswords, power armor, and no scoring. They do have Crusader, Scout. They are a support squad, so they can't take up a compulsory slot. And Scouring Tempest, once per battle during the shooting phase. When you are an active player, the whole squad may elect to use Scouring Tempest, and their flame weapons will gain pinning and 3-inch torrent. Unsurprisingly, these guys are a little more themed to Mortalis. They start originally, oh my goodness, 125 points for 4 dudes and a sergeant. That's horrifically expensive. The next 10 models are 15 points a model. For every 5, one can take either a Flamer or a Volkite Serpenta at 5 points. I guess if you want to use Scouring Tempest, you want to take the regular Flamer. Actually, I don't know. Are Volkites considered flame weapons? I don't think so, but I remember that they had that interaction with Vulcan last edition. One hunter may take a Vexilla, the Hunt Master may take Meltabombs, Artificer Armor may take a Plasma Pistol, may exchange his Chainsword for a Frostblade. If you play a lot of Zone Mortalis, you may have a better perspective on these guys than what I do. I feel like they're very expensive for something that doesn't seem to really do a whole lot.
Yeah, I mean, 10 Greystalkers just naked out in the street is 145 points, and they can punch things.
Yep, sure can. And they could take Volkite or flame weapons and serve a similar purpose. Anyway, and then the Space Wolves only have one legacy unit, and it is the Fenrisian Wolfpack. And I think this is left over from when you could take the Fenrisian Wolf kit last edition. You could buy up to 2 lesser wolves as like war gear, the same way you used to be able to in 40k. So you can take up to 5 total Fenrisian wolves. The first wolf is 10 points, additional wolves are 5 points each. And they have the pack retinue, where they may only be chosen as a retinue for a model with Legions of Astartes and Master of the Legion. This model is referred to as the pack leader for the purposes of this rule. It does not use up Force Orc slot, must be deployed with the model, and the leader may not voluntarily leave, may not be selected as part of an army without a leader. In close combat, they are Strength User, AP Dash, Melee, Shred, and their stat line: Movement 7, Weapons 3, Ballistics Dash, Strength 3, Tough 7, 1 Wound, I3, 1 Attack, Lead 5, 6 Up Save. They are Light Skirmish Infantry. Mom always taught me, if you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all. So we'll talk about Giger Fellhand. Giger Fellhand, 135 points. Move 7, Weapons Ballistics 5, Strength 4, Tough 4, 3 Wounds, I5, 3 Attacks, Lead 9, 2 Up Save. This is the guy who stood opposite of Armin in the Burning of Prospero box set. He has a
super cool model
pistol, a bolter. He has the Fell Hand, frag and crack grenades, a refractor field, artificer armor. He is a character. He has the skirmish unit type. He is relentless, counterattack 1, Master of the Legion. He has Crownbreaker by default. Crownbreaker being that what was it? Hatred or preferred enemy? I think it was preferred enemy, independent character.
Yep.
which, cool. If you wanted to put this guy with some stalkers, you will get that kick multiple times in a turn. Not bad, but he's definitely designed to go with stalkers / slayers, and I think he could be a great fit for some Zone Mortalis games in that regard. Biggest downside to him I see is that he is somewhere oddly or awkwardly between a Praetor and a Centurion. Further, his unique weapon is the Fell Hand. Strength +1, AP 3, melee, mastercrafted, rending 5, shred, reaping blow 1. So he will claim dual armed with it to get the kick to 4 attack space, 5 on the charge, pretty alright. He does have that heroically large base that will make it easier to claim that reaping blow, but you really kind of live by the rending 5, die by the rending 5. I like him much more if you don't make him the Warlord. If you, for whatever reason, are like, I've already got my Praetor, and I've already got my Speaker of the Dead, and they're going with the Varigir, and I've got another HQ slot available. I don't know why you're not taking another Speaker or Caster of Runes with some, the Death Wolves, Death Swarm, that one. There's that. But overall, this guy's not bad.
No, I think he's fine. I'm not normally a huge user of special characters, but I don't see a whole lot wrong with him. His rules are fine.
Then we've got Havarl Redblade, 210 points, move 7, weapon 6, ballistics 5, strength 4, 4 wounds, I5, 4 attacks. +1 wound is pretty shiny. 4 attack space definitely puts him firmly into Praetor stat line territory. He has the Hearth Splitter, a Heavy Bolter, a Grenade Harness, Iron Halo, and he's got Tartaros armor. With Tartaros getting a little bit of a glow up, there's some real opportunity to put this guy with a Terminator or a Tartaros retinue. He has Battle Cunning, he has Master of the Legion, he's Relentless, Inexorable, Counterattack 1, Fear 1, and Bulky 2. Fear 1's pretty cool, especially if you choose to put him with Tartaros instead of Varigir. Next, he's got a dedicated Warlord trait, Head Taker. He and all models in any friendly unit he joins gain preferred enemy infantry. In addition, his army gets an additional reaction during the assault phase. Awesome. Battle Cunning. Up to 3 units of infantry get Scout. If you really want to try to push some units up the table, keep in mind that if you give a unit Scout through this and it's in a dedicated transport, it will end up giving Scout to that dedicated transport. Likewise, that also grants Outflank. If we only had some special rules that synergized with Outflank in this army. Finally, we've got Hearth Splitter. Strength +2, AP 2, melee armor bane. Super cool. Strength 6, Paragon, Axe thing. You do lose the Murderous Strike, which is not ideal, but having Armor Bane gives you a better chance to be able to fight back against something like a Dreadnought or chop your way into a Land Raider if circumstances go sideways.
He's one of Varl, number one, he reminds me a lot of like going back to 5th edition 40K, where, you used to take a special character to build your army around that kind of like it worked because of the special character you had. And Varl's kind of one of those guys, right? Like you take him, you pair him up with like a Pale Hunter Rite of War, and then all of a sudden your whole army is moving, either scouting or outflanking or coming on the board in untraditional ways. And so he's very much one of those, you take him for a very specific play style, and your army is kind of built around working with him.
No question. Very, very much like Dynat in that regard.
Agreed.
And finally, that'll bring us to Leman Russ. Leman Russ being the Primarch, 450 points. Movement 8, weapons 8, ballistic 6, strength 7, tough 6, 6 wounds, I7, 7 attacks, lead 10, 2 up save. He also has the skirmish unit type in the chance that you put him with some of the stalkers or slayers. He's got the armor of Elvigar, the axe of Hellwinter, the sword of Bale Knight. He has Scorn Spitter and frag grenades. He's Master of the Legion, has Howl of the Death Wolf, counterattack 2, and he is the Sire of the Space Wolves. Sire of the Space Wolves says that all Space Wolves get +1 strength when they charge. He doesn't need the Howl for +1 strength, and he doesn't give it only one turn. That is every single time they charge, they're getting +1 strength. Once again, if you like Deathsworn, I think Lehman Russ is a great pickup for you, if for no other reason than it lets you take those rad grenades and kind of push into territory where maybe you shouldn't be. Howl of the Death Wolf. Once per battle, he may declare the use of this special rule. For the duration of that turn, Space Wolves gain +1 movement, and any enemy units that include Space Wolves take an immediate pinning test. So, super weird interaction that they let him get the chance to just ground out an enemy Space Wolf army. If you're playing that kind of narrative play, awesome. I don't know that I would ever expect it to happen, but regardless, in the way that we talked about White Scars, getting +1 movement on the whole army is wild. So suddenly your Grey Slayers and Grey Stalkers move to movement 8, which means they'll get +1 on the charge. You do still get to run while charging. You can cover a vast amount of distance very quickly, and because of Sire of the Space Wolves, you're going to hit very hard when you get there.
He's just a force multiplier, and everything he does makes his dudes better.
Yep. Armor of Elvigar. 2-up armor for a Penwhelm save, increased to 3+ against Flame, Melta, and Plasma. In addition, any enemy models in base contact with him suffer -1 to hit to a maximum of 6+ when he charges. He's got the Sword of Bale Knight, Strength +1, AP 2, Melee, Murderous Strike 4+, Brutal 2, Fearsome Ruin, and Mastercrafted. So the fact that you've got Strength +1, so you're already Strength 8, and that's before you've charged. Murderous Strike 4, so in the off chance that you're bumping into a Dreadnought or a Thanatar, you've got the chance to gut it there. You can cause multiple instant death wounds at a time because of Brutal, and then you're signing it off with Fearsome Ruin. Any unit which suffers 1 or more casualties from this weapon and makes a morale check must roll an extra d6 and keep the 2 highest to determine the result. So it's very, very hard to not break when you get hit by that. Mastercrafted, in the off chance that you wanted to put your Speaker of the Dead somewhere else, which is not honestly the worst choice, given that the Narthesium does not work on Primarchs. Certainly a thing there. The Axe of Hellwinter, Strength +2, AP 2, Melee, Sunder, Reaping Blow 1, and Mastercrafted. So again, keep in mind that he will get the kick to Strength 10 with this on the turn he charges. This is definitely the I need to take down a knight, I need to find my way into that Spartan kind of weapon. But it's cool that he's got that to fall back on if needs be. Finally, Scorn Spitter. This to me is kind of a lemon of a weapon for Primarchs. Once again, hearkening to our White Scars episode, where I kind of lamented that the Khan's gun, I was just like, why bother writing this? 12-inch range, Strength 4, AP 3, Assault 3, Rending 6-up. Hooray.
Does anybody ever remember to shoot their Primarch's pistols?
I did every single time that I played Alfarius, and that was only times when I didn't need to use his Cognis Signum. But
I remembered once.
Yeah.
One time. And that's because I made a point. It was because I think I may have been on, I can't remember if it was on y'all's podcast, somebody's podcast. I was talking about salamanders at one point on a podcast that was not mine. And we went over the salamanders rules, and I read Vulcans, and I was like,
special guns.
I never remember to do that. So the very next game I played, I went specifically, I'm going to shoot his pistol today, shot it, and then have promptly forgot ever since. So yeah, it's just I guess it's nice that they have them just so that way they can go. I mean, I like to make
Sometimes
racket.
it can be nice to have them. In Russ's case, he definitely has some real motivation to run in the shooting. Actually, no, he doesn't want to run in the shooting phase because he's not infantry type. That's pretty funny. Anyway, I distinctly remember last year's Michigan GT, Korax deciding to shoot my Siege Tyrants while he was attached to Dark Furies. And the Dark Furies did not survive that encounter. That went very, very poorly for that squad. And he, as soon as I went, I would like to return fire, he knew he messed up. It was very challenging. We do also have the Wolfkin of Russ. 100 points for 2 dogs. They are skirmish and light. Move 10. Frecky is weapons 5. Gary is weapons 7. Both are strength tough 5. 4 wounds. I5. Frecky gets +1 attack relative to Gary. So Frecky therefore will be 4 attacks. Gary at only 3. And their lead 8 and a 5 up save. They are considered Wolfkin of Russ. They themselves are fearless. They have Fear 1, Rampage 2. Rampage 2 is really good on paper, but challenging in practice to use because each of these models are bulky 4. So there are a total of 8 models if they make it to combat together. They do have Hammer of Wrath 1 and Feel No Pain 5. Feel No Pain is kind of the thing that you're relying on to keep them alive here. Wolfkin of Russ may only be taken if Lehman Russ is in the same detachment. They are treated as an HQ choice as far as special rules, objectives, and missions, but they do not take up slots in the 4-sword chart. They cannot be joined by any other model except Russ himself. Their melee attack is strength users, that'll be strength 5, AP 4, melee, breaching 6+. Once again, if this is the kind of thing where you fight a lot of Trader Mechanicum, if you come to the end of your list and you're like, I have 120 points, what do I do with it? And you're full up on other models you've finished or Force Org slots where you can spend that kind of points, maybe Frecky and Gary are a good pickup. They can certainly be harassing, but I don't immediately know that they're worth reaching for as a first thought as part of list construction.
No, probably not. But they're not too expensive either. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, 100 points for a couple dogs, pair them with Russ, run them around.
Completely. I think there's real opportunity for utility in using them as distraction carnifexes. All right, we'll cap it off with the Rights of War. Their first Right of War is actually a little more novel, and that's the Black Watch. You can only use it as allied Space Wolves. Your Space Wolves gain Hatred Traitor and Preferred Enemy Primarch. I don't know how you're going to chop down a Primarch, but go get him, Slugger. All models in the Black Watch detachment gain Fearless when locked in combat with Traitor Primarch. And units from this detachment which declare charges targeting Primarchs get +2 to charge. Cool. May not include vehicles. Not too bad as an ally. And may only be used by loyalists. No surprise. Kind of niche, kind of weird, but certainly thematically appropriate.
Yeah, I don't know how much play that one will get, but I do appreciate that it's in there and that they actually gave some thought to, hey, we've wrote about these watch packs. Like, we know people have modeled them up. Why don't we give them some rules to allow people to use them and use them thematically? And I think the rules do fit their intent and what they're used for. I got no issues with them. I think it could be a fun little flavor for somebody to add to a list for sure. I appreciate them.
Now, here's the real meat and potatoes. Pale Hunters and Bloodied Claw are back from last edition. Pale Hunters. All Grey Slayers and Grey Stalkers gain hit and run, and when making a hit and run, may choose to move up to the distance rolled rather than the full distance, so long as they remain at least an inch away from enemy units at the end of the move. Hit and run is very, very strong as far as giving you the opportunity to break through enemy ranks and get to further back targets than what you might normally be able to. Looking at you, heavy support squads. Subject of which, if only you could hit and run and then immediately use the unique reaction to get into combat with something that really wishes you wouldn't get into combat with them. On the turn in which a unit from this detachment enters play from flanking, remember we talked about Havarl Redblade, keep in mind his scout ability does not require him to be the warlord, so if you chose, you could double dip Havarl and Lehman Russ and pull some of these tricks off. Those models gain Fleet 2 and Rage 2. Really, really strong there. And up to 3 units made up entirely of infantry and or cavalry may be upgraded to grant all models in those units the outflank rule at no additional points cost. So you could theoretically take Havarl and push that number as high as 6. You do only get a single heavy support choice, and at least 1 unit must be assigned to flank assault. Pretty straightforward. Doesn't bear quite as heavy a restriction as some other, dare I say, lean and mean rights of war where it restricts you from the heavy type or forces vehicles into reserves. Clamping you to a single heavy support choice can be challenging, but I don't think it's insurmountable by any reason.
No, and it's pretty neat. Like the one thing I do like about these rights of war is you have the Pale Hunters, which is like, so we talked a little bit last episode about the different things that Space Wolves were known for, right? Being the tip of the spear, being the ones that go in and do those head hunting missions, the ones that go in and break a line wide open. And these 2 rights of war are very, very good at kind of showing that on the battlefield. So you have these Pale Hunters, and it does represent that kind of head taking, that hunting force, right? Where you're getting flanked, you're coming in, people are coming in from the sides, people are coming in from the front, going, chasing down some kind of opponent or enemy. And I think the rules do a really good job of representing that.
Yeah, and we've also got the Bloodied Claw. Bloodied Claw at once per battle at the start of their own player turn, the Space Wolf player may declare a Bloody Claw. Once the claw is declared, and until the start of the player's next turn, all Space Wolves gain the following benefits. +1 to see who wins combat, Fleet 2, Furious Charge 1, and gain the Stubborn special rule, or if they already had Stubborn or similar, gain Fearless instead. So if you wanted, you could double dip this with the Wolf Howl earlier, and you could push your army to Strength 6 for a turn, or you could get 2 different turns at Furious Charge 1 effective. Of course, obviously scales exponentially once you get Lehman Russ or something in there. During the turn in which the controlling player has declared the Bloody Claw, but all units that include at least 1 Space Wolf must attempt to charge if eligible targets are in range and line of sight. So the Bloodied Claw is kind of the risk little, gain little philosophy to list construction. There's no restrictions on it, so you can just take a normal list, and if you don't have a right of war that you immediately fit for, might as well just grab Bloodied Claw, because it doesn't cost you anything, generally speaking.
I think that's a really good point, Jacob, because I think, kind of like what we were talking about just a second ago, so each one of them represents kind of a different way that the Space Wolves fight. So the Bloodied Claw is very much that line breaker, tip of the spear type force, where with the Pale Hunters, you really have to kind of build a list that works for Pale Hunters. Where Bloodied Claw, you're right, it is kind of a plug and play. Hey, would you like to be really awesome on the turn you charge with your whole army? Okay, perfect. Take Bloodied Claw then. And, kind of like what you were talking about, pairing that with the Howl of Mordecai, you do like Jim Carrey and Liar Liar, and it's the claw, right? And then all of a sudden, the turn you're charging, you're hitting with +1 strength, Fleet 2, Furious Charge 1, Stubborn, and +1 to combat res on normally turn 2 or turn 3, whenever you decide to trigger that. And in my experience, when you're moving, you're running, you're charging, plus the Fleet 2, you can do that on turn 2. And it's awesome when you hit with your entire, like you've got like 5 charges going off and it's all the way across the board and things are bad. It's a lot of fun. And I'm a big fan of running that Bloodied Claw and pairing it with the Howl of Mordecai and then popping those turn 2, turn 3.
Yeah, it's definitely the case where it's kind of fascinating to me that Space Wolves have gotten a Rite of War that kind of scales all the way up and down the stack, where you've got the allies only Black Watch if you choose it. Like I said, I don't know that I would immediately be chomping at the bit to choose it, but it's there. You've got the Bloodied Claw for the why not Rite of War, and then the next level up with Pale Hunters and the shenanigans you can pull off there.
Allows you to build some really different stuff.
Absolutely. Is there anything that you would say that we haven't touched on that's really important for you to kind of stress here?
I think my main takeaways from Space Wolves, if I was just going to kind of sum up everything we've talked about, Space Wolves are fast, and they're a lot faster than you think. And with fast and the skirmish, you can run a lot of infantry, you can get a lot of dudes on the board, and be safe from a lot of things because it lets you spread out, keeps you from getting blown up with templates. I think skirmish is such a huge part of what makes a lot of your troop choices really, really good, because it keeps them survivable and lets them spread out so far. You take a big unit and I mean their threat range is just enormous because you can spread them out so big. The Space Wolves are doing damage whether they get charged or are the ones doing the charge. Every unit you take can be punchy. Every unit you take can be a threat. There are no throwaway units in the Space Wolves. That's I think my favorite part about them is that you can take any unit and throw them into most any other unit and have some kind of expectation that you're going to do something. There is no, like when I run my Salamanders and I've got 10 TAC Marines completely naked in a Rhino, I hide them. I don't want them to do anything. And you don't have that in Space Wolves. Like they're kind of like World Eaters in an aspect. And one of the things I love about World Eaters is that their best unit is their core troop choice. And it makes the army so much different when the basic thing that you have to take is one of the better units that you have in your army.
Yeah, for those of you, since I don't think we said it out loud, skirmish gives you a 3-inch cohesion, which it turns out for a Horde army, making you fundamentally immune to blast weapons is pretty okay.
It's awesome. Big fan.
All right. Does anybody have any last notes, sort of as we kind of go to wind this down?
Thank you, Jake, for coming on. That's what I have.
Yes, Jake, it's been a pleasure to have you on the last 2 episodes.
No, I'm
Indeed.
happy to be here.
Anything you want to plug? Anything you want to shout out?
Bloodied Claw. Can I declare that?
Okay,
Well,
listen, I know you and I know your people, and just because you spend a lot of time saying there's no law when you're on the claw doesn't mean that you can say that here as well.
Oh my God.
You're welcome. I'll be here all week.
I would expect nothing less.
Gentlemen, it's been a pleasure. And similarly, listeners, it's been a pleasure. I've been Jacob, and on this, the 55th episode of the Heresy Accountability Buddies podcast, I've been joined by
Duncan.
Jack.
Jamie.
Joan.
And then that's me, Jake.
and Jake. Jake, thank you again, sir, for joining us. Jake of Covenant of Fire fame. And remember, listeners, stay accountable to your hobby and to your buddies, and we'll see you here next time.